Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. I'm one of your co-hosts, Chris Bixby, and with me today is our other co-host, Matt Bingel, and our host, Jake Deffinbaugh. How are you both?
Doing
Good.
great, Chris. How about
Doing
you?
good.
I'm doing good as well.
Awesome. So what do we have?
So today's guest, he was a writer on Sesame Street for many years, later the head writer as well. And he also co-created a show called Between the Lions. And also on Sesame Street, he created the character Baby Bear. And we're here to talk about that and some other things as well. And here he is, Lou Berger. Lou, how are you?
I'm fine. It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you too.
Good
So,
to see you
You too,
too.
Lou.
yeah, so to kind of kick things off, we know who you are, but for those who don't, would you care to introduce yourself a bit?
Well, I think I'm Lou Berger. I was a staff writer for 150 years on Sesame Street, and then became head writer. I was head writer for 11 years on Sesame Street, and had the opportunity to work with this extraordinary staff of writers, producers, and Muppeteers.
Nice.
I've worked on other television shows, kid shows. I'll select the kid shows. I worked on a very early Nickelodeon called Pinwheel.
Ah, yes.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
I was staff writer, then head writer for that. I worked on Reading Rainbow
Yeah.
with LeVar Burton, the first season of that, and then went on with did the Dr. Seuss, the Dr. Seuss show.
Oh, yes.
And then with Norman and Chris Surf and Mike Frith helped create Between the Lions, which was
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome.
Really nice.
Awesome. So what was your background like and how you grew up?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and as a kid, I was one of those kids that was always writing stories and silly songs. And when I was in the fourth grade, I think my first big thing was that I wrote a play, a tragicomedy, a musical that was put on for the school, and it was well received. And I was always a kid in class who was making up stories, and and I didn't think that was going to be my life's work. Actually, what I wanted to be was an actor, and I did go
Okay.
to the High School of Performing Arts. Interesting to note, I went there the same year that I was in the same class as Sonia Manzano.
Oh, nice.
Went on to play
Awesome.
Maria, as you know. So we were in the same acting class. We graduated performing arts at the same time, and she went on to do the wonderful work that she's done. And I basically I started writing more and more. And when I was in graduate school in Madison, Wisconsin, I wrote a play called Show on the Road. It was about a father and son, and actually it's about the father driving the son to high school, the performing arts, and the conflict between them. The son doesn't want to talk about anything, and the dad wants to know everything. So it was, and it was done locally for the PBS station in Madison, Wisconsin. And just by every now and then, your work catches a lucky wave. It's sort of like water surfing, and it was picked up nationally and won all sorts of awards. And somebody saw it and recommended me to somebody from Children's Television Workshop actually saw it and recommended me to this new television network called Nickelodeon. And so I worked on a show there that I don't even think was televised in New York. It was a show called Hocus Focus, and nobody knows the show except the kids who grew up watching it. Jim Jenkins was in it, and who went on later to create Doug. He was one of the puppeteers.
Yes, he's gone on to create some really wonderful shows.
Really wonderful
Yes.
shows, and he was terrific to work with. So that was sort of like the off Broadway of writing for children's television, but it was a great experience. We weren't watched that closely, it was just a bunch of nudniks in a room having fun. And then from there, I went on to Pinwheel, which was again like the off Broadway production of Sesame Street. It was a magazine show, puppets and music, and comedy sketches, and that was wonderful. And then years later, I had the opportunity to audition for Sesame Street, and wound up, which is where I always wanted to work. I really thought that the combination of being able to write for children, but at the same time, that second level, write parodies, and really write for both audiences at the same time, getting the adults to laugh, getting the kids to laugh, but never losing the educational message to the kids. So that was my first dream job that I wanted, and was lucky.
So how did you get inspired to get into writing?
Well, I said it was like really early on. I mean, when I was in the fourth grade, I had one of these wonderful teachers that you get once in a lifetime who sort of encouraged me, and sort of liked my little story writing and silly songs that I wrote. And she was very encouraging. And when you're encouraged at the age of 9, it's
Wow.
quite extraordinary.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mrs. Kosakowski. So there you go. I could never spell her name, but she was.
Yeah.
Do you remember what your first writing job was?
My first professional writing job. Well, the first thing I got paid for was in Madison, Wisconsin, was for the PBS show. In order for them to air it, they actually had to pay me, and it wasn't a lot, but I can't tell you how exciting it was to go to the local Madison, Wisconsin bank with this check for $2,000. And back then there was no, by the way, cash machines. You stood online, and the person wrote it into your little passbook. And I was online there with my wife, and it was very exciting. It was like the first real paycheck. I had been paid as a kid. Well, you brought back a memory. When I was about 12, my dad knew people who lived in Manhattan, and I was always the kid in the neighborhood who was putting on puppet shows and writing puppet shows and putting them on, usually behind the chair in the living room for my cousins. Mm-hmm. And my father said to me, I know somebody, and I told them about you, and would you like to make $5? $5 back then was a lot of. So I went to this party in some ritzy apartment like on Park Avenue, with my little box of puppets, and I put on a puppet show, and it was very well received. And I thought, I didn't think of it as a career. I just thought, I can't believe they're paying me to put on a puppet show, which basically became the story of my life. But
Well,
yes.
So before working on Sesame Street, you had mentioned Hocus Focus.
Yes.
But you were also the head writer on the Nickelodeon show Pinwheel.
I was, yes.
Yeah, so which was the very first Nickelodeon series for.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, in fact, Hocus Focus was interesting because I don't think they were airing in New York yet. When I told people I was working for this network, Nickelodeon, people looked at me like, what are you talking about? Pinwheel later on started being picked up in New York, but mostly it was outside of New York. It was really like doing off Broadway, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was a very intimate group of writers and actors and the crew. We were shooting it out of a truck on 9th Avenue, I remember, and it was just very, very exciting. And there wasn't a lot of buzz about the show, so what it allowed me to do was just try anything, and that basically was my motto as head writer. Let's try anything that we think is fun, and we'll figure out how to do it. It didn't have to be expensive. And that was a terrific training ground.
Yeah. So now, we talked a little bit about Reading Rainbow in the beginning. You also helped launch that show. Can you kind of talk about like what that process was like?
Well, it was really learning what the show was. I mean, this idea that you're going to introduce kids to books and read the books, and you try and do it in a way that's slightly cinematic and, without destroying the texture of the book. So it became it became quite a challenge, which I think was solved in an interesting way. I mean, they would show you the book, there would be a musical score, the cameras would pan through the book, and you'd have somebody like James Earl Jones, do the narration and read it. So it was sort of a theatrical reading of the book. And then you would find different segments that would sort of illustrate. We did a book called Digging Up Dinosaurs, which is a wonderful book about dinosaurs. And I was trying to figure what is the best way to show kids how large dinosaurs were. And I thought, I was walking home from the city to go to the subway, and I passed a construction site. And there was all of these huge mammoth machines working, digging up, crunching up gravel, doing all sorts of stuff. And I was thinking, boy, if you put a little kid in that construction site, that might give them an idea of how powerful it was. So we did what started as a live action, if I remember. We did put somebody amongst the machinery, and then we slowly dissolved and turned them into dinosaurs. So that the sound of these machines crunching and ripping and gravel snorting, it was very powerful. That was the challenge of that show, to take a book and then find other ways of expressing what the ideas and the themes in the book were.
Yeah, it's a really good show, and it went on for a long time.
And LeVar Burton was wonderful, I thought.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask, like, what was it like getting to work with him?
I didn't really do much studio work. I met LeVar at the library once when he was giving an interview, and we got to speak a little bit. But I was never as involved on Reading Rainbow as I was with Sesame Street, partly because I was just at Sesame Street for so many years.
Right.
And the nature of Sesame Street is to be involved, is to be working with the Muppeteers, to be working with the composers and everybody. It's a completely different experience.
Of course.
Oh yeah. Do you have any favorite episodes of Reading Rainbow?
Of Reading Rainbow, the two that I worked on that I really did like a lot. One was an early one called Louis the Fish, about a kid. I think it's written by Arthur. What's the name of the writer? Arthur Alinsky. I don't want to give the wrong name, but it's a wonderful children's book about a boy who just yearns to be a fish, and I think his family wants him to do other things in his life. And of course, at the end, he happily becomes a fish. It doesn't have one of these morals, which, you should find, you can't be a fish your whole life, my boy. He becomes a very successful fish. I did like, there was one called Bringing the Rain to Kapiti Plain, about bringing rain to a drought area.
Oh, wow.
And I'm trying to remember. I think James Earl Jones did the narration of that. I'm not positive. It was many years ago. But yeah. But again, it was much less involvement in production for me as Sesame Street or Nickelodeon. It was much more come up with the ideas and come up with the script and then hand it over.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm by nature somebody who really loves to be on the set and working with the puppeteers and
Right.
Hanging out with the writers and watching ideas, fly back and forth, which was the large essence of what Sesame Street was.
Of course.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to Sesame Street, how did writing begin for you for that?
I thought you were going to ask me, how do you get to Sesame Street, which I was.
that's a good question too.
Well, yeah, I used to tell people you take the R train to Steinway Street, but that's how did I get on? The question was, how did I get on Sesame Street?
How did you begin writing for Sesame Street? Yeah.
Well, it was. I always wanted to write for the show, and I went through. They put you through a huge. Just getting my foot through the door was a huge thing. I was recommended. I was recommended by a very well-known screenwriter who, over my life, has been my mentor, Robert Benton, and he said, "I think this guy could do it." They did not immediately accept me. I had to go through literally a 6-month audition period, and before and that included writing sketches, like write a Bert and Ernie sketch, write a street sketch. And I did that for months. And then finally I was told, you're going to get now to meet the head writer. It seems like they told me I passed summer camp and now I'm actually going to the real thing. So then I was sent to meet Norman Stiles. And my first meeting with Norman, I was waiting in the outer, like the lobby, waiting for him to call me in. And then he came to the door himself and he said, Lou, come on in. And before he went into the main security door, he looked up at the camera and he started going like this. I don't know if Norman will remember this, but he started going like this. Da, 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 da. And he said to me, I like to keep the security people entertained.
That's funny.
And then we went in together and I
Love
realized
that.
we were gonna get along. And the very funny thing was I sat down for my first meeting with Norman. He was going to go through my scripts with me and he was telling me, you're basically accepted here, but we need you to do an audition script, an entire show. And he said to me, don't you work here? And I said, no, I don't work here. He said, I see you here all the time. I said, Norman, they've been auditioning me for 6 months. I've been coming up and down here, And I would go to the Sesame Street offices and I'd go through their old videotapes so that I could watch street scenes and watch Bert and Ernie scenes, and because it takes time to get those characters' voices in your head. So for my audition script, which was you write a full show and then hopefully it gets on air and then you're really part of the team. I really did my research and I really came and I tried to find out the show, as much of the show I could understand the relationship of the characters. And for me to hear the voices of the characters in one's ear, even when I was studying acting, for me, it was always, what's the rhythm of it? What does it sound like when two people are together? What's that particular rhythm? And even if you just think of Bert and Ernie, you don't have to put specific words, but you hear that, you hear a music that, hey, Bert, what do you, now come on, Ernie. And it's a music, and until you hear that in your head, you can't write for the show.
Right.
I'll tell you a funny story, though. The hardest character, who do you think the hardest character for me to write for was Big Bird. Because
Okay.
Big Bird, unlike if you think of Cookie and the Count and Grover, they have very specific. If you think of Cookie and the Count, they're obsessive. Cookie wants one thing, and the Count wants one thing.
Yeah.
Big Bird comes as close to being a human child in many ways, and I could not get his voice completely in my head. So I wrote, when I was first accepted as a staff writer the first year, I wrote a lot for Telly, and a lot, because Telly I could identify with right away, and wrote a lot for Telly, and I could write for Grover. I was able to write for the other characters. Snuffy was very specific. Big Bird. So I asked Carol Spinney one afternoon at the studio. I said, would you mind if I just followed you around while you're acting, and so I can really listen to you do the performance, not just on. And he said, sure, why not? He's a very, very sweet guy. So I was following around, and once he put on his, as he called them, his chicken legs, and he was walking out of his room, and he's going la 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 la, and I go, do you do that all the time? And he said, yeah, it helps me get into the mood of it. And I still remember I went home to my office at home, and I sat down and I sat at my back then typewriter, and I went la 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 la, hi Snap. I had it. It took me a long time, but I cracked through, and that's how I was able to write for Big Bird. And then I loved writing for Big Bird.
That's awesome.
It didn't come easy, but it was worth it. It was worth it.
Of course. Do you remember what the first thing you wrote for Sesame Street was?
I do. It was an audition script, and it was, see if I can remember, it was either Telly or somebody was looking for this bird called a flutitude,
Oh
and
wow.
and the flutitude makes a special sound, and he keeps finding these birds that make weird sounds, but they're not exactly the flutitude. There's one that's like a Baltimore, one's a bird that just goes here, batter, come on, batter, and that's sort of a Baltimore order.
Ah,
It was trying to make the flutitude. And finding that was the first one. That was in my audition script, and they liked it, and it got on. I had also the experience. I saw your interview with Louis Santiero, who's wonderful, and he was recalling that when he went on the set for the first time, it's a very awesome experience. And John Stone said that thing about who wrote this shit. It wasn't John
Yeah.
Stone who did it to me. That tradition was passed on to Frankie, the cameraman.
Oh wow.
And so
Oh,
there I was. I was walking out on the set, and I was so excited. I mean, there's something about when you walk through those doors, and there's 123 Sesame Street, and there's Hooper's store, and there's the cast and all this incredible color. And
mhm.
they're just about to do my sketch, and Frankie goes, "Who wrote this shit?" And
Oh my gosh.
just like Luis, I had, oh my God, they've seen right through me. And then he introduced himself and says, "Nah, it's great stuff. I do this to everybody. This is your initiation." So
Mhm.
and
Oh my
that's the
gosh.
very famous "Who wrote this shit" initiation.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
that's great.
Yeah, and Frankie's been there since day one.
Oh God, yes. He once said to me, I started out the first time I came to the show, it was a PB, it was some sort of experimental thing. And I come out, and there's a guy wearing these chicken legs. And there's this song, la, 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 sunny day, He said, I gave this 6 months. He said to himself, I give this show 6 months. He said, now I built an extension to the house, a porch, he got some. So he's part of a very fun crew to work with.
That's awesome. You mentioned the Sesame Muppets you love writing for. Do you have a favorite human character to
Human
write for?
character, I really loved. There's a few that I can't put above each. I loved writing for Maria and Luis, and I loved
Yes.
the
Oh,
I loved
yes.
the Fix-It Shop. The idea that there's this bare table outside that anybody could show up to, and have something fixed, and they both had a combination of warmth and
Hmm.
enormous humor, and very 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 sympathetic, and they were a couple that the Muppets, when they were troubled, could approach. Which one of the things I think the show used to do very well is that the Muppets could be very vulnerable, and they would need help from an adult. Uh, and I always thought Luis and Maria were wonderful. I loved writing for Bob.
Ah,
Oh,
rest his
The
soul.
warmth, yeah, and the warmth of Bob and his beautiful, genuine singing voice, and
yes.
how he related again as an adult who gave comfort to the Muppets, and that's when the Muppets could seem most childlike and most needy of care, and was there for them. Uh, all of the adults actually were fun to. I was there during the years of Mr. Hanford. I was for some of the earlier, and Mr. Hanford was wonderful. Again, they all had different musical notes, if you think, but they were all very warm, and they all knew how to listen. So if somebody came over and said, "I'm having trouble," what, they could go, "Well, Big Bird," or and explain it, sometimes through a song.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
definitely. So Now, on the subject of Sesame Street Muppets, you created the character Baby Bear. How did the
Yes.
idea for Baby Bear come about?
Baby Bear came, I think it came out of my own memories of sibling rivalry. Of There was something about the Baby Bear Goldilocks.
Mhm.
And so when Baby Bear, the first Baby Bear sketch was, and I still remember writing and thinking it was going to be a one sketch sort of a thing, is that Baby Bear comes to the fix-it shop and he's really pissed off because this pest Goldilocks has broken his chair. And
Oh my
and
God.
Luis says to him, "It's okay, we can fix this." He goes, "You don't know what a pest she is. She'll eat my porridge. She'll do. And it's just like real, brother sister sort of a thing." And so Luis fixes the chair, and as he's leaving, I forget what happens, but obviously Goldilocks shows up and causes more trouble. Norman loved the sketch and the performance of David Rudman as Baby Bear.
Mhm.
He found the combination of irritability and lovability, which is hard to do together. Livability and lovability is if you ever find somebody who has livability, irritability, and lovability,
Mhm.
and he did it great. And then I wrote a very early song for the two of them where they're both complaining about baby. It's called "Grr Sorry," and
Oh, yes.
Oh.
yeah, and Baby Bear singing something like, "Every time I've got something, she takes what I've got. My da 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 da, my favorite spot." And she goes,
Yeah.
"Sorry." She goes, "Sorry," and he keeps going, "Grr," and that began to really establish, which is "Grr Sorry." And she was always apologetic. She never meant to hurt him. She was just, if you put the
Yeah.
two of them together, it was fun. And David's performance was wonderful. And
Absolutely,
then
yeah.
more
Amazing
writers
character.
wanted to. What happens with Sesame Street in those days? You couldn't force anybody to write for somebody they didn't want to write for. It's like sometimes new characters would show up and everybody would think, "Oh, this is going to be," and nobody goes, "Well, it's a one sketch sort of a thing." Everybody wanted to write for Baby Bear, and
Mhm.
what grew out of that was, the other Muppet that I really did always love to write for was Telly. And what that
Oh, yes.
allowed was a friendship between Baby Bear and Telly that was very warm.
Mhm.
It gave Telly something besides just worrying, although he did worry sometimes
All the
that
time.
Yeah, all
Baby
the
Yeah.
Bear
time.
got very upset that Baby Bear was going to be the triangle lover of the day, even because he took him to a triangle lovers club. Baby Bear had all the right answers, and Telly couldn't believe he's not even a triangle lover. Uh, about the triangle lovers, if you're interested, I was home once. My son was sick, and I was watching him entertain himself by drawing all sorts of triangles, and it seems like he liked triangles. And I was thinking, it would be nice to give Telly something that's not just about worrying, that gave him a passion, gave him like a great hobby. And I thought, well, he could be a member of the Triangle Lovers Club, which again was started off as a one sketch thing where he goes to Luis and he's very upset because he's gotten this package. And he said, "I'm a member of the Triangle Lovers Club, and look what they sent me." And Luis goes, "What's the matter?" He opens up the box. It's just 3 sticks of different colors. And he goes, "Sticks. They send me sticks. What am I going to do with sticks? I'm a triangle lover." And Luis goes, "Hold on
Oh,
a
Telly.
second. It comes with directions." So they unscroll these directions. It says, "Take stick A and attach it to stick B." And of course,
Oh my
when it's
God.
done, it's a triangle. And he goes, "I didn't know that." And Luis goes, "Yeah, there's many ways,
Mhm.
So that was the beginning of Triangle. Then out of that grew, I thought it'd be fun that he's a member of the Triangle Lovers Club, that there must be a Grand High Triangle lover, the guy
Oh, yes.
who was played brilliantly by Kevin Clash. He's a Grand High Triangle lover, and
Yeah.
Telly always like freaks out when the Grand High Triangle lover is coming to Sesame Street because this is his idol. And then he has a little assistant played by Dave Rudman, who keeps dinging a triangle in the Grand High Triangle lover's ear, driving him crazy. Boss, yeah. That sort of thing. So,
Do you have a favorite episode, insert, or song that you wrote for Sesame Street?
I try to. I thought you might ask that, and I tried to. There's so many, but one of the Muppet inserts I wrote, which I've always liked, and it's gotten attention a little bit, was Monsterpiece Theater, Waiting for Elmo.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that one. Yes.
And
Monsterpiece Theater is amazing.
Yeah, and the production of that was amazing, because I wanted to do a parody of Waiting for Godot, but I wanted to take Waiting for Godot seriously at the same time. So it was Grover and Telly standing under that tree that we all remember from Waiting for Godot, and the wind is blowing, and what we were teaching was emotions. And so you hear Telly goes, "I hope Elmo comes, because if he comes, it'll make us happy." And Grover's going, "Yes, happy." And he goes, if he doesn't come, it will make us sad. And they do happy, sad, anger, surprise. And then they just stand and the wind keeps blowing. And then finally the tree says, played by Jerry Nelson, the tree says, "All right, I can't take this anymore. I don't understand this play at all. Why couldn't they do Oklahoma? I understand Oklahoma." And he walks off singing, "Many a New Day." And they did a very brilliant production of it, which is one of the thrills was you would come up with these ideas, and other things other episodes I'm just looking to that I love. There were episodes that I was head writer for, which I was very proud of working with the writers on it. We worked as a team. Was the whole season of Slimy Goes to the Moon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
when you thought about it, it was Oscar doesn't always get a chance to show the tender sides of him, but the relationship between Oscar and saying goodbye to Slimy as Slimy goes off to the moon is very similar to what a parent goes through when a kid goes off to kindergarten for the first day. He's going out of the parent's orbit, as it were. But we were given the time to really, track this story. And one of the things that was great fun was I got to work with this woman from NASA. This was here I am at Sesame Street, and we had to have a science advisor for all the stuff about space that we didn't give wrong information. And the Slimy wasn't going to NASA; he was being tested by WASA, the Worm, Air, and Space Agency, which
Yes,
is
that's right.
it's probably down the block, from that.
Yeah.
And one of the things we had to come up with was they asked me to come up with tests to differentiate amongst the worms who want to go to the moon, who really has what it takes, the right stuff, the right wormy stuff to go to the moon. And I remember that one of the tests I came up with was for stickability. And what we did was we put 40 Muppet worms on a Lazy Susan. And then the technician who was in charge of this brilliant test spun it very, very fast. And Muppet worms just splattered against the wall, except for Slimy and 7 or 8 others. And that meant he passed stickability test and take the next test to be an astronaut. And I remember feeling very proud when the person from NASA said to me, "Well, if we were testing worms, that would be a good test." So that's it.
Yeah, the Slimy Goes to the Moon episodes are really fun.
Yeah.
The other series that we did, again, this is when I was head writer, that was just really interesting to work on, was the Hurricane series.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
When a hurricane, which was how do you find the humor and the warmth. And I still remember going on the set, and they had really done this incredible job of stressing what the set looks like. I mean, there were leaves and branches, and Big Bird was standing in front of where his nest used to be. And all he could say was, "My home, my nest."
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And the great Sesame Street writer, Judy Freudberg, who
Oh, yes.
wrote that first show, we were just sitting in the office. She just said, "My home, my nest," and everything. Oh, Judy, that's so right. So he keeps repeating that, "My home," and then and Gordon says, I think Gordon says, "It's going to be it's going to be all right." And Big Bird goes, "No, it's not.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Like he doesn't buy into right away the simple solution just because a grown-up says it. Yeah. So Gordon says, you're right. We're going to have to work on this together. We're going to have to rebuild. We're going to have to rebuild your nest, and it won't be the same, but we're going to. And it becomes about the community getting together, and helping Big Bird. So is that of just silly shows that I wrote that I loved was when Telly gets a note from the Grand High Triangle Lover's office that the Grand High Triangle Lover is sick, and that he's asking Telly to be the Grand High Triangle Lover for the day, and he's given a desk with like 6 telephones where triangle lovers from all over the world are going to call him up with triangular questions. So we had questions like somebody in a shower on the telephone saying, "I don't know if I should wear my shower cap with the blue triangles or the shower cap." And Telly's just freaking out. He doesn't know how to answer all these questions. And at the end of the day, he's exhausted. And thank goodness the Grand High Triangle Lover comes back and it's just fine.
Yeah.
Other episodes, there were episodes of it. There was a character that I created for Jerry Nelson, which wasn't done a lot, but which was great fun. And it was Sir John Feelgood, the actor.
Okay.
And he shows up because he's an expert on pretending, and he wears a cape, and he'll go first. He shows up, and Big Bird thinks there's a dog on Sesame Street. It's not a dog. It's Sir John Jerry as this character, and he goes, "I'm not a dog. That's pretending," and he sings and he teaches. He's going to give him a lesson on how to pretend, and he sings this song, "That's Pretending," which is a parody of That's Entertaining. That's Entertainment, which was later done as a Muppet insert with Martina McBride.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sang it with Elmo and the whole group of Muppet characters. It was wonderful,
Yeah. Do you have a favorite song that you wrote?
I have a few. I mean, from the New Year's special, there's a song I wrote with Steve Lawrence. What is it? This not This is the Street. I'm thinking of This Is the Street I Live On, which was the other song. How did that go?
Is it the one they do at the end of it?
The one that they do at the end of it.
Faces That I Love. That's the
I
one.
see faces that I love.
Yeah,
all my
yes,
friends
very good song.
with me, and then the whole cast starts singing. I wrote that song with Steve Lawrence. I think it's a beautiful melody, and the way that song was written, I was on vacation, and we needed a final song for the New Year's special, and Steven sent me back then a cassette. And I was staying in a summer house that had almost no electricity in it with my wife and my kids. And I put the cassette into the car and I heard this beautiful melody. I then spent my 1 week vacation driving all over Martha's Vineyard, listening to this tape, trying to come up with the lyrics for that. Because I usually write lyrics first. And then one of the composers would write the music. And finally I heard the phrase, "Faces That I Love." And then I was able to write it fairly quickly, and then it was UPS back to New York. And I thought Stephen did it, and I thought that particular ensemble. I wrote a song for the Count and the Countess, called 2 for 2, which is just a giant, beautiful 2, and they're singing a parody of T for 2, but it's 2 for 2, that's for me and for you. And he's showing her this beautiful 2, and they both fall in love looking at this number 2. And then there's a silly song I wrote with Chris Surf, which we both had fun with, which is Mr. Between.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The guy who loves to get between other things, basically pushing his way through. And the Muppeteer for that was a guest Muppeteer from the Muppet. It was Dave Goelz.
Oh, wow.
Who played Mr. Between. He was brilliant. He's like a baggy pants vaudeville character. See if I have anything else down here. It was just wonderful to have Mr. Between, 2 for 2. I did like the song at the end of the 35th anniversary that they all sang. "This is the street I live on." The
Yeah.
other, the
Hmm.
other, the
Beautiful.
other,
Great
the other
song.
day, I listened to it, and because I wanted to hear Bob sing, there's a moment when Bob sings, "This is the street I live on," and it's very warm, very wonderful.
Yeah, so in terms of the New Year's special and the Street We Live On special, what was it like writing for those?
Um, it was very exciting. It was given an enormous amount of freedom, the New Year's special. But the problem with the New Year's special was I had to work with like 5 other countries. New Year's special has a story of Telly doesn't want there to be a New Year.
Yeah, and
Yes.
then
Hmm.
Gina, okay, Alison Barlow,
Yeah.
which
Hey,
improves
what's
her
wrong
aunt,
with what's
she's
wrong with
just
the old
helping
year?
Telly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
be there.
Why can't we keep the old year? I like it the way it was. Um, then we were working with Germany and
Yeah.
Israel and Portugal and Norway, and so we had to get their New Year's little segments edited into that. So I was head writing. I was head writing writers from other countries, which was truly, and it could be a show in itself. You know,
Yeah.
I had one experience where on the German show, and they were very well meaning. One of the Muppets eats the marzipan. You have to understand that when on New Year's in Germany, you eat marzipan, but one of the Muppets couldn't wait and he ate the marzipan. And so their way of dealing with it was I got a script saying that he couldn't go to the New Year's party because he had to be punished. And I remember getting on the phone and saying, no, we can't punish a Muppet. I said, he's got to go to the party. And they said to me, yes, but
Yeah.
he ate marzipan. I said, I know. I said, but he's got to go to the New Year's party. And we had a reasonable
Yeah.
conversation. And they said, they're very nice. I said, okay, listen, if you think that works, basically what they're saying was, let it be on your head. You know, if kids all over the world will now be eating marzipan before midnight. Um, so, so, that, so that was a very ambitious show. The 35th anniversary show, and that was a prime time, and it was very exciting. And the prime time 35th anniversary, I wrote with Judy Freudberg, who was a joy to work with.
Hmm.
And basically, that idea was going back through like a time machine taxi and seeing highlights of over 35 years.
Yeah.
And that was that was great fun working with Judy.
Yeah, both of those are really great specials.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Love
Thank
the
you.
specials. Yes.
absolutely terrific.
Kevin was
Yes.
a brilliant performer
And director too.
and director, and I
Yes.
was also going to say innovator. Elmo's World, which
Hmm.
Oh, love Elmo's World.
I
Yes. Great segment.
was a very interesting beginning of Elmo's World because we realized we needed to do something new. That it seemed like research said that at the last 15 minutes of the show, kids were drifting off. Whether or not that was true, the writers and the producers had a lot of meetings and they decided to come up with something brand new. And because Elmo was so popular,
You need to do something to him.
do something
Yeah.
with Elmo.
Hmm.
The idea was, and there were a few writers that basically we just locked in a room, and I would go in every now and then and schmooze with them. But the idea, and Judy eventually became head writer of Elmo's World.
Yeah.
The idea was, which is actually a very interesting idea, that no matter what you look at, if Elmo's thinking about a cup, then all of a sudden you can include the whole universe. Because who makes the cup? When do you drink from a cup? What colors can a cup be?
Yeah. And then Alma would be like,
And what
I
what
need
it
to
does is,
know learn more about Cubs.
I want to
Yeah.
learn
I
more
can
about
find
cups.
out
Let's go to a
more.
cup
So,
factory. Do you
like
have a favorite?
anything.
And it's that idea that you can look any single thing in the universe and open it up so that it includes everything. That it's never just one
Yes.
thing. And if you look at Elmo's World, you realize that that's really how it begins. Elmo's been thinking about fish or something. But you can't think about fish without thinking about the ocean. You can't think about the ocean without thinking about what do they eat. Well, where do the stuff that they eat come from? And everything leads to everything else, which we thought was really quite an interesting adventure to put the kid on. And because it's Elmo, uh,
Alma wants to learn about everything.
Elements on that. Now, the other brilliant thing, and I don't know who came up with this. It could have been Judy, could have been Arlene Sherman, who was the executive producer for Elmo's World, and had a lot to say about all the artwork and everything. Getting Bill Irwin to play Mr. Noodle was a huge coup, because suddenly you weren't just doing these slapstick things. You had a great comic mime and artist playing Mr. Noodle. And those became very special little sequences that you began to look forward to and to write for Mr. Noodle. Mr. Noodle always doing things wrong, but doing things wrong in such a physically funny way, or being lifted up in the air. So I think Elmo's World, Judy and I spent the first year, it's either the first year or the first 2 years, we basically sat in my office and we with the writer's help, but Judy and I went through every Elmo's World, and it was an exhausting new process that we did. And then Judy took on the head writership for Elmo's World, and it definitely has her sensibility in it,
Definitely.
Yes. Elmo's World, amazing. So over the years, you also work with some of the celebrities who come on Sesame. Do you have a favorite celebrity to work with?
As head writer, I would come out and I would basically meet different celebrities and stuff. But when I was writing, I'm trying to think I got to work. I did a show again, Fix It Chap. I did a show with Deborah Winger, the actress, and she's a wonderful actress. We're trying to think of what can we do for her. So we came up with a story that she rode her motorcycle all the way from LA with a broken toaster, because she heard that nobody fixes toasters like Luis and Maria. So she basically motorcycled, and we kept her motorcycle on the set, in the Fix It Shop. And she then, what's the film she was in? Urban Cowboy with John Travolta. Anyway, she was at the height of her popularity then. And she was a good sport, and she did lots of scenes, and it was great fun. And that what we really enjoyed was the last scene where she goes to pick up her toaster at the Fix-It Shop, and she's told, we're so sorry, we're not done yet, because we also have a toaster from Brando and De Niro, and you see all these toasters on the table of the Fix-It Shop that celebrities have brought in from all over the world, and she has to wait for it. So that I got to meet. I mean, I'll tell you, my big regret was Bob Dylan was going to do the show, and I wanted to write for Bob Dylan. So, and I guess he had a grandchild or something. And a lot of times when celebrities have grandchildren, they want to be on Sesame Street, because they say, doesn't matter what I do, but if they see me on Sesame Street, it'll be like legitimate. And I wrote a song which never got sung because he had to cancel. But I wrote, instead of lay lady lay, I wrote a lady a. I've got an A on my big brass bed, and it was to teach the letter A.
Oh, that's awesome.
I couldn't do that, and then I couldn't do. I wrote a song for Willie Nelson, that for reasons I won't go into, but it wasn't Willie Nelson's fault. He never appeared, and it was, instead of On the Road Again, it's We're Gonna Read Again, with the entire the entire cast of Muppets, with him singing "We're Gonna Read Again. A book is just the thing we need again." And it was
that's awesome.
Wow.
So that was heartbroken. Somebody that I did want to meet, who visited the studio, was the actor Alan Arkin.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a huge fan of Alan Arkin, and he was doing a show across the hall. So I went over to our executive producer, I said, "Would you introduce me to Alan Arkin? I don't want to just burst into the beach." And I never asked to do that. And so he brought me over, and I said, "Mr. Arkin," he goes, "Alan, call me Alan." And I said, "Alan, I just want to thank you for all the great work you've done." He went, "Oh, no, thank you. I love Sesame Street. My kids love Sesame." He couldn't deny.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He was so
Sweet.
sweet and genuine, and it wasn't one of those terrible moments that people look back over years and say to themselves, "I wish I hadn't approached them."
Yeah. Because how could you with Sesame Street?
Right. Was that?
Exactly.
And I said, how could you not, look back on Sesame Street in a positive light?
Well, you
Right.
never know. I agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting you had mentioned Oklahoma earlier. I was actually in New York. I've brought this up with these guys before to see some of you folks watching, listening may remember Sesame Street the musical that was
Yeah.
in New York a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I went to see it and it was amazing.
Was
It
it?
was
I have not seen it.
Yes, it was really, really good. It had some original songs. Um, who was one of the composers? Tom Kitt was one of the composers for it. And it's funny. They have all these parody posters, and I love these parody posters. Unfortunately, the one in this book's cut off, so thank God I took a picture of it on my phone when I was up there. But they actually did El Oklahoma. Let me turn up my brightness a little bit here.
Let me see.
We'll
Oh
show
my
you folks in
gosh.
Oh,
post.
that's great.
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
great. That's
you just
great.
gotta love all the parodies with Sesame
Well, that was a
Street.
joy of years ago
Yes.
of how many things you could parody. I mean, basically, that's what Monster Piece Theater was. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you were
You could
doing
probably make a
parody,
parody of everything for
you
Sesame.
know,
you
and
could.
that was
I
and
mean,
again, as I said earlier, the idea was that you could do something that an adult would get. Oh my God, they're doing a parody of Streetcar Named Desire. They're doing a parody of Ernest Hemingway, of Samuel Beckett. It doesn't matter because the kids are getting. It has to work on the number one. It has to work for the kids to get it, uh,
mhm.
Mhm.
and that was the joy of if you had an idea for a parody, you know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Definitely.
yeah. So, along with the many other Sesame Street writers, you've won
Yes.
many awards. You've won many awards for your contribution to the franchise. How does it feel that Sesame Street has become such a successful property and still is to this very day?
Well, when I joined the show, it was a successful property, and I wanted to. There were two shows that I always wanted to write for. One of them was Second City, and the other was Sesame Street. That I felt those were two shows that if I could write for those two shows, um, I'll be very happy. Either of those, and I got Sesame Street, and we've, it, and it does. You do realize that when you're working for the show, that when you mention that you work for Sesame Street, you do have this kinship. I mean, I've had people, and I'm always surprised, and then I'm not surprised. They want to give you a hug, and they want to thank you for being part of their childhood or whatever, and it's very moving. I mean, it's because you're off on your own writing this stuff, and it goes out there, and it's not like being in a theater where you feel the audience.
Mhm.
Writing for television or movies can be very lonely because you write to something and you go, boy, I wish I could see the people watching this. So
Mhm.
it's very, very rewarding. You know, I did get to work with. We did have Second City people on Sesame Street, so that was
Oh,
Andrea
wow.
Martin. Andrea Martin
Oh.
came on. She played. I wanted Judy. She played a fairy godmother, and instead of a wand, I remember she made the choice of coming out on the set with a Black and Decker drill. And I remember Judy and I went over to her and I said, "What's with the Black and Decker drill?" She goes, "Well, anyone can use a wand, but I want to be a more practical fairy godmother."
That's awesome.
There you go.
No, it's just that sort of a decision. That
Yeah,
silliness was allowed.
yeah,
So
Absolutely.
Yay.
silliness was
Yes.
allowed.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy. So recently we lost another one of the original human cast members that we of course already mentioned earlier, Bob McGrath. Can you
Yeah.
share any fondest memories from working with him?
Well, over the years, Bob and I hit it off, and we would talk to each other. But I have a very special memory of Bob because my son is a very gifted composer, and he gave me a song that he wrote once um, called "I Am Your Friend." And he said, "Do you think this is a Sesame Street song?" And I looked at it, I said, "I think this is a wonderful song." And I gave it to the producer, not telling her that my son had written it, because I didn't think that was a fair thing to do to anybody. And she loved it. And It's a beautiful song, and they actually just showed it on a clip on it. It's Bob and Telly are sitting on the stoop of 123, and Telly's really upset because he's holding a broken triangle. And Bob says, "What's the problem?" He says, "My triangle broke." And he says, "Oh well, that's okay. We can." And I understand. And Telly says, "You must be a real friend of triangles." And Bob says, "Well, no, Telly, I, I'm a friend of yours." And then he sings a song, I am your friend. I sure do care about you. La da da da. I'll be there when you're down. And it's this beautiful melody, and he's in this, and we're all teary-eyed in the and I went over to Bob because I'd watched Bob with the earphones on, and he knew my son wrote it. He went, Lou, this is not an easy song, but I'm going to get it right. And I saw Bob 3 years right before the pandemic. The January before the pandemic, I was at a birthday party for the great writer Emily Kingsley.
Yeah, but you
yes,
her on
another
too.
previous guest.
And Bob was there. And so this is many years have gone by since he sang my son's song, Spencer's song. And I said, Bob, I have such a great memory. We're talking about memory. I have such a great memory of you singing Spencer's song. He turned around to me, and without missing a beat, he went, I am your friend. I sure do care about you. And I melted. I mean, I said, I can't believe you remember that. He went, oh, sure. That's a beautiful song. Okay. So that's like, and I reminded Bob of that because we did for his 90th birthday. I was one of the people that contributed to the video that we did for him singing Happy Birthday. And I mentioned that song. And always that, it's always a very moving memory to me.
Yes.
Yes.
It's like these are people, this is a strange thing. You work 20 years on a television show and you work with these people. It's like Bob was Bob to me, and the other great memory I have of Bob for me personally is that once a year at the Emmy Awards, when we were nominated, I would get a call from Bob because he would be a presenter for the children's category. And he'd say, I need a joke. So he'd call me at home and we'd talk together and we'd try to come up with something thematically linked that was kind of funny. And that became a tradition. And one year he called and my son picked up the phone and he was with two of his friends. And he goes, oh, hi. He says to me, Dad, it's Bob. And he turns around to his friends and goes, it's Bob from Sesame Street. And they went, Bob? And you would think like these kids were like 12, like they went, it's Bob, and Bob said hello to everybody. And but the feeling was, it's Bob.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's great.
You occasionally wrote for the series The Webulous World of Dr. Seuss.
I did. I was one of the I started out with Michael Frith, the brilliant designer, artist, writer. In fact, it started off with the two of us. Michael had this idea, and he and I would sit together thinking, if you were doing Dr. Seuss for Muppets, what would it be? And the challenge would be to write your own shows. And so I did work with that. The one great memory I have of that was Michael and I flew to LA to meet Dr. Seuss's widow to get her okay on doing this. And so we flew and we had the Cat in the Hat Muppet with us in a box. And we happened to show it to the flight attendants. And we were like, Michael and I, we had such a nice trip. They couldn't be too nice for us. And we had the Cat in the Hat out of the box. And that was great. So so we went to LA to pitch the Webulous World of Dr. Seuss to Dr. Seuss's widow.
Awesome.
She was okay.
That's really cool.
Really cool. So
that's awesome.
So now we talked about this earlier, but you were one of the co-creators of another long-running PBS series, Between the Lions.
Yes.
Can you talk about kind of what went into creating it and what your part was in
Well,
creating
my
it?
part was at the very beginning again, which was really wonderful. I was just beginning to, I was really very busy with Sesame Street, and head writing Sesame Street is, was enough for me to deal with at that time, taking over for Norman. And then Norman was one of the co-creators. He and Chris Surf came up with the idea for Between the
Yes.
Lines, and Michael Frith. So they asked me to come and be at the beginning to really help create the show. By the way, when I took over for Norman as head writer, just as a thing, he said to me, I'm passing the torture to you. That was a big joke. I was at the very beginning where we literally brainstormed. We went to Chris's house in East Hampton, and we sat around and we just came up with all sorts of fun ideas. And then I was there for the very beginning again of brainstorming. And I remember we were sitting on Chris's patio when we came up with Cliffhanger.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We were always singing Cliffhanger, hanging
Yeah.
from a cliff. That's why it's called Cliffhanger.
Yes.
And I went to Boston to meet the educators and the reading. That was a very heavily researched show, and really Norman and Chris and Michael did most of the actual writing and work on it. I was fortunate enough to be called in as a creator, and so I was there at the part of just brainstorming and coming up with ideas. One of my favorite things, I don't remember, that I thought was, we spent a lot of time laughing, a lot of time laughing in East Hampton. And one of the things that made me really hysterical was we were trying to come up with a detective parody. And so we came up with Sam Spud, Potato Detective.
We love Sam Spud, yes.
And I don't remember the first time we were talking about it, we were just throwing this around. You heard a voice saying, gosh, the name is Spud, Sam Spud. I was sitting in my office when a tomato walked in. She was a real tomato. She was a real tomato. And
yes.
There's a tomato walks in, because she has a problem. But the way you said, very Borger-like, she was a real tomato. Actually, she was a real tomato. So that was, those were the early days of my being on Between the Lions, and it was a ball. It really was fun because I was working with Chris and Norman and Michael. And at that point, I'd worked with Norman and Chris for years.
Right, on Sesame, yeah.
Sesame Street, and I knew Michael.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So this is going to be tough. Do you have any favorite episodes or songs from Between the Lions?
I don't. I can't. I was too busy. I was very busy with Sesame Street. Whenever I would go upstairs sometimes, I was shooting at Kaufman Astoria, and I'd watch some of the shooting Between the Lions. But no, I like the whole idea of lions running a library.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you go into a public library and it's a family of lions running the library. They had, Cliffhanger. What's her name? The Ruth, the woman who did the sex.
Dr. Ruth Wordheimer.
Dr. Ruth Wordheimer. Which was probably Norman or Chris, and supposedly they told me stories that she was just a ball to work with, that she was like really, really great. So no, again, with Between the Lines, the big part of that job went to Norman, Chris, and Michael and the writing staff, and I was fortunate enough to be asked to be there at the very beginning, so I got to be part of, again, the brainstorming, but I didn't really write any of the scripts.
All right, so are you still in contact with anyone from Sesame or Lions?
Oh yes. Actually, since the pandemic, it's a very nice way of saying that shit that happened. Since the pandemic, Norman came up 3 years ago. It was right after the pandemic started because we were all going to have lunch together. Occasionally, the writers would get together and have lunch. And he said, why don't we do Zoom meetings once a week? So once a week for the last few years, a group of the writers, like 7 or 8 of the writers, whoever can make it, it's not, get on. And there hasn't been a week that we've missed. I mean, sometimes you'll miss it because you can't make it, but it's a very nice thing that during this period of time, the writing staff that worked for so many years together and does feel very much like family, gets to talk to each other for an hour.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I know Emily Per Kingsley kind of talked to us about that too. So and Kathy
Luis
Turo too.
And Luis,
and Luis and Turo,
and they both are part of it. Yeah, they're both very welcome.
That's a wonderful thing to do.
That
really is
wonderful
It
idea.
is. It's these are very special people, and I have just wonderful memories of working one-on-one with each writer, because one of the things the head writer does is that you sit in the office and somebody comes in with ideas and you bounce them back and forth. And so there's a lot of laughing and a lot of, head scratching. Will this work? And then you also have the experience of sitting in a group with the writers, which is always quite wonderful, because you would have a group writers meeting, let's say once a month. And one of the things Norman initiated was, if somebody's having trouble with a script, they could say, or are there other ways to go with the script? They can throw it out to the other writers. And what's very nice about that, there wasn't a sense, a lot of writing shows are competitive. And, but Sesame Street shares the credit. It's like there's a credit roll, at Sesame Street. And if the show's nominated for an Emmy, the staff is nominated for the Emmy. It's not, you pick a writer's show. And you submit it, but it's the entire staff that's nominated. And what that does, and it actually makes sense because all the writers have either helped work on all the characters or have some sketch in there over the course of a year. It's very collaborative. So you're sitting in a room and somebody has trouble with a script. Ideas go back and forth. And usually they can bring the script to a place that's very exciting. And while they're doing that, ideas for other shows come out, because it's usually a collision, is that you have an idea and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I could use that in this show, or wow, there's a whole other show that could come out of that. Well, we could do a sequel to that. So that was always very exciting being with that group.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
That is awesome. So overall, do you have any specific funny or interesting behind the scenes stories from your writing work that you can share?
Well, outside of, lots. Starting off with my first day on my first day on the set, and did you write this shit? I don't have any specific that jumps up. Probably when I get off, I'll have like 400 specific. I'm trying to, it was a day-to-day sort of, it was always just a pleasure to be around. There was a lot of laughing. No specific, particular. I enjoyed watching, from my point of view, I enjoyed watching Muppeteers figure things out. And one specific was watching Frank Oz.
Yes.
The New Year's special. In the New Year's special, Grover's assignment is to go all over the world and come back with information about what's going on around the world. And he brings back a large donut from, I think it was from Germany or Norway, I forget where. But he enters rolling across the frame on the donut. And you just hear him going, rolling. And Frank was such a perfectionist that we had to get that rolling on the donut across the frame on the camera exactly right. And it was like that sort of specificity and that sort of caring, went on all the time. All the time. I'll tell you one little bit of thing that you might find interesting was I always thought, well, I could be a Muppeteer. I worked with puppets when I was a kid. And so I was on the set a lot. And they once did a sketch of vegetables singing, a healthy vegetables can be healthy song. And the person who was supposed to play the string bean was late, couldn't make it. And so they looked at me. It was either David Rudman or Jim, somebody or Marty, and said, "Hey, Lou, you can be the string bean." Well, I can be the string bean. This is it. In all these years, finally making a full, masquerading as a writer. So here, my real life is I'm going to be a Muppeteer, a string bean. So they give me this long stick that's the string bean, and when you click this part of it, the mouth opens and closes. And it's pre-recorded. They said, you don't have to do anything, Lou, except move your mouth. And when we move to the right, you move to the right, we go left. What they didn't tell me, and they didn't tell me on purpose, that if you don't have experience and you're looking at the monitor, when you move to the right, the puppet's moving to the left. There's a reverse thing
it's all
going.
Mirrored.
Oh, no.
And that's second nature to these guys and gals. So they start the song, and I'm going, this is very thrilling. I can do this. Why didn't they ask me sooner? So the vegetable song, we're all healthy, and they're all going that way. And all of a sudden, there's one vegetable, the string bean, that's going in the direction. And then I try to catch up. It's what you would do is I'm going in the wrong direction. So as I go this way, they're trampling me going the other way. Now, I don't know if they used that shot. I don't know, but I really felt I was set up by my friends to have the time of my life trying to keep up with a group of, and it's still, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night screaming that I'm being trampled by a tomato. But a real tomato. So yeah, that's probably
that's brilliant.
That gives you the spirit of the people I work with.
That's
it was
funny.
great. It was great fun.
That's
And
funny.
occasionally I get to be an extra. I got to be an extra on the show occasionally. When Telly breaks his arm, I was sitting in a hospital chair as one of the patients, outpatient, waiting. It was this very elderly woman who was sitting next to me, and she was an extra. And she turned around to me. She said, "Would you mind changing seats with me? This chair is a little uncomfortable for me." So I said, "No problem." I changed seats with her. She was very professional and savvy. I was suddenly not seen when they actually shot it, and she was right in the shot, and she knew that where I was sitting would be the better extra seat. So I was usurped by a hospital stand-in.
So this is kind of an interesting question. Do you have any memorable?
Oh,
yeah, Matt.
This is an interesting question.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah,
when you worked on Big Bang, yeah.
I'm going to show a demonstration for those wondering real quick. Come here, you. What? I'm dragged into this? Oh boy!
Oh, good work. Hire that man.
Yes. So
this is what the writers' meetings were like, just so you know.
How fun! Fun. So let me demonstrate for you folks real quick. If the puppets are moving this way, he went this way, right? Yeah. And if they went this way, he's poor guy's gonna get trampled.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My high moment as a Muppeteer, yeah. I also got to be one of the arms in the two-headed monster once with
wow.
And I was able to do that, but it was very sweaty and very, very, it smelled like you were in some trunk somewhere. But
that's interesting.
I was proud. I got to be part of the two-headed monster.
Not that
very
trunk.
Character.
Not that trunk, Julius. Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, anyway, thank you, Julius. You're welcome. There he goes. Do you have any? I just popped up for a second. Do you have any memorabilia or anything from the projects that you've worked on you like to show or talk about?
Well, I have lots of stuff from Sesame Street, including all the scripts I worked on, all the scripts the writers worked on with original notes that I took on all the scripts. I have
that's cool.
I have lots of little Elmos and Big Birds. I have a prop of soap suds in my office. I have no idea what show it's from, but I have a photograph in my office. It says The Triangle Lovers, and we once did a parody of The Honeymooners. And what they did was they actually created. I wanted to look like the Honeymooners set in black and white, and Telly is visiting the home of the Grand High Triangle lover, and the Grand High Triangle lover is sort of like Jackie Gleason, and his assistant is sort of like Art Carney, who lives upstairs. And Telly is overwhelmed that he's come to the Grand High Triangle lover's apartment, but the apartment was in black and white, but the Muppets were in color, and it really looked great. It really, really looked like the Honeymooners set with the Muppets invading, and it was great.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's amazing. So overall, what do you enjoy most about being a writer?
Uh, well, first of all, you get to live inside your own head and get a chance to get some of that stuff out of your head, which is probably very healthy, and give it to other people. And
Hmm.
it's very exhilarating. Uh, Certainly, a show like Sesame Street or something that's collaborative, you spend a lot of time by yourself. And then when you get into the what's really, really a joy is when you see it come to life. And and most times with a show like Sesame Street, it comes to life even more colorful than you imagined. You know that.
Hmm.
I mean, when I wrote the Waiting for Elmo sketch, I really pictured it. Uh, and then when I saw the amount of care they would take in terms of everything, the visuals, the sound, if they were doing a song, the composers were quite wonderful. Uh, So I mean that the thrill is that you know that you're writing something. I can't wait to come to this. Always very exciting the days that you wake up and you know they're shooting your episode because
Right.
those are the days when you most feel alive. Because wow, I'm going to the studio. I'm gonna see Kevin. I'm gonna see Marty. I'm gonna see Jerry. I'm gonna see Bob and
Hmm.
you know and I'm going to see Sonia. And it's like you really are working with people that you've known for years, and you're going to do something
Hmm.
that you really. And it's very thrilling when you let's say write a song, and you actually see it being shot, and realize it's going to be there. It will exist. I mean that's very exciting.
Definitely.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yes, of course.
Yep. So we've talked a lot about your work in the past. Can you share any projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, I wrote a children's book called Dream Dog that was published by Random House, and
Nice.
I've written a musical based on it. I wrote the book and the lyrics, and my son has written the music for it. So, and right before the pandemic, it looked like we'd get it. So I have to get that on, and always working on something. But that's complete. That's completed.
Hmm.
So
Nice.
That's
Nice.
Great.
awesome. Awesome. Can we for that to see it or to get published or anything in the future. So, as a writer, what challenges would you say you faced during your career?
well, the early challenges are the challenges of getting the first writing job is always
Mhm.
is I think for most young writers they figure out how do we do this, and then along the way um, making decisions about projects you want to work on, or if you're working on a project, wondering am I doing this? Each every script that I worked on at Sesame Street posed its own, because you're not trying to repeat yourself.
Yeah.
So you know, posed its own not problems but challenges, and how are we going to send a worm to the moon? How are we going to do that? How are we going to make kids feel comfortable after a hurricane destroys Big Bird's nest? Uh, it's the separate challenges of the show. I think the bigger challenge for people who want to break into writing is how do I get that first job, and
How do you start on something?
how do you start on something? Uh, I would think that people who are writers, just the way actors are actors. I
Hmm.
mean, if you're a writer, before meeting anybody that you want to work for, you should have something to show them, obviously. And you know, I'm also think that it's so hard that, it's so hard to get that first job. And I know that people are giving advice. Uh, I am a believer in the 6 degrees of separation. And I do believe in this idea that if you can decide what sort of a thing you'd like to work on, like is there a television show you'd like to work on? Not as a staff writer to begin with, but you would like to, how do you get in touch with somebody who works there? Do you know anybody who knows somebody who knows somebody? And often that 6 degrees of separation does work. Not always,
Yeah.
but there's a good chance of one, identify where it is that you'd like to work. What kind of a show would you like to work on? And does anybody in your family, your friends, school, do they know anybody who's attached to that show at all? Uh, you know,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think
Mhm.
definitely a great piece of advice too. I think
Oh,
that's definitely a
yes.
great piece of advice.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So, are there any words would you like to those who are watching or listening who have supported your work over the years?
That what? I'm sorry.
So we can three. So, are there any words would you like to say to those who are watching or listening who have supported your work over the
Oh,
years?
thank you. Yeah, no, thanks for watching. And it's particularly very, very, very genuinely moving when people come up to you over the years and tell you that they've seen your work or that you've been, especially when they say you've been. I've had people say to me, "You helped raise me," and
Yeah.
my answer is I don't want to be blamed, But it's incredibly moving when you realize how many people have watched. Because you write for television, you work for a show like Sesame Street. The writers would talk about this sometimes. That you just write it and you send it out and you forget.
Yeah.
You almost have to forget. You have to sort of feel like you're working on this thing so you just whatever comes into your mind can't be overwhelmed by the size of an audience. But it's very, very it's just very moving and it means a lot to one's life that somebody says, "Oh, I remember that. Oh, did you work on that?" Uh, that's a huge thing, you know.
Definitely. Definitely. So, if people would like to connect with you, where can people find you?
I guess. I mean, I'm not going to give out my. I've been reached through the Writers Guild. If somebody really wants to get in touch with me, they can get in touch with the Writers Guild, and the Writers Guild will give you my. They'll ask me, and if they now know how to reach you, and
Right.
they can always come through this, you know you can ask me, and I'll say sure, it's okay, unless
Nice.
unless it's some
Awesome.
spam or something.
Nice.
Mm.
So nice.
Awesome.
This last question
Yes.
is the question that we ask all of our guests at the end.
Yes, yes, of
Hmm.
course. Of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of, or how do you define the word nostalgia?
It's a great question because I think it's a word that takes people say nostalgia and people immediately go, "Oh, it's a warm feeling."
Oh, yes.
I guess if I had to express what nostalgia is for me, and this may be a little convoluted, it's a reunion with with an event or an object that years ago lit up your life, and you're sort of
Hmm.
having a reunion with that object years later, and it brings back such a rush of good memories of what it was, how vibrant it was to have that in your life at that time. And then, the
Yeah.
years, it is kind of a reunion. The other day I found it in going through my office, somebody had sent me, one of my friends who knew that I grew up loving Superman,
Oh wow.
the Superman
Huh.
comics, Superman comic books from like the 1960s,
Wow.
early 60s, mid 60s. He sent me an early Superman comic and I was taking it out and I just had a rush. First of all, it, the colors leaped out at me. The sense of excitement that I had as a child, the anticipation. Um, it was like something that when I was a kid was my own little clubhouse. I would go off and I would read, I would read a Superman comic and just love it. So it's like a reunion. It's like a reunion with with something that was so real to you and meant so much to you. And now years later, filtered through the years, and you don't always have that sort of a feeling for objects and things. All of a sudden, it brings back that freshness of what it was like to experience the world years ago. So it's a little convoluted, but I would guess I feel it's like a reunion with yourself somehow.
Definitely a great note to end
Great
on.
words.
Definitely agree.
Thank you for that.
Well, thank you guys. It was a very pleasant hour to spend with you.
Thank you.
Oh yes, you too. You too.
Terrific.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
You're doing good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lou.
Thank you so much, Lou.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and can't wait to see what's next in store for you.
Yes. And thank you for being part of our childhoods, and keep up the great work and see what's next, for you. So.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yes, of course. A pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks again, Lou. All right. See ya. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, Lou.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from us.
Yes, It is goodbye from all of us, and from all of us to all of you. Remember to keep nostalgia alive, and we will see you with more wonderful, amazing interviews.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.